Hello, everybody. This is Ernie Labby from IntelliChief. We're going to get started in about a minute, and this webinar is to cover IntelliChief Audit Toolbox. Okay, this is Ernie Labby. We're actually just going to give everybody one more minute just for any late attendees, and then we'll get started. So we should start no later than 2:02. Okay, hi everybody. Thank you for joining IntelliChief here for our webinar on IntelliChief Audit Toolbox. My name is Ernie Labby. I'm the Chief Product Officer for IntelliChief, and I'll be taking you through this webinar. So I believe we have this outlined for 45 minutes, but I have probably about half an hour's worth of material, which is great because it will leave ample time for any questions that I can answer for you about this topic, or for that matter, anything else that comes up that may come to mind. You see my email address here. More than happy for you to take that down, and if you have any questions, please let me or anybody else from IntelliChief know, and we'd be more than happy to follow up with you. All right, so let's get started. All right, so our agenda for today, want to cover really some audit activity overview, so kind of set the stage for how IntelliChief can provide value in your audit process, and then use that information to then discuss IntelliChief's capabilities, and then leave ample time for a demonstration, and this will hopefully tie it all together for you. Okay, so as we go through here, so first, when we talk about audits, so we at IntelliChief recognize that our customers may be faced with or have requirements for many different types of audit or compliance. Here we have some of them, whether it's HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley, any type of Department of Defense criteria. These audits and the information that IntelliChief is storing for you, we can definitely play a part. And also, if you think about the fact that audits may be a moment in time, right? But really, it's about making sure that we can maintain this information for your current needs as well as your future needs. And so as we start to dive in here, and you think about, regardless of the audit scenario that you're faced with, you can really think about it in terms of sort of the activity that you may have to do, right? So what's really required of you in this audit process? And what we've seen a lot of times, that involves making your financial records and associated documents available. So you know we've seen needs or requirements to provide things like AP invoices, and not just the AP invoice, but the related documents, maybe the check or a receiver that goes along with it. You may need to validate your controls associated with your business process. And not only that, but ensure that you're following that business process by being able to then demonstrate that the controls you have in place are truly being followed. In a nutshell, you're being asked to provide proof of your business process, that it is in place, that it is enforced, and that you have the documentation, whether process-wise or from the process, to show your auditors, including any report capability. So how does IntelliChief fit within that? So if you take a look, we've got some of these questions back from that prior slide, and then some areas where IntelliChief fits in. So we talked about what you may need to do, and that's provide those financial records. So if you look at the base of what IntelliChief does for you, we can store any document associated with your business process. We have a method to make that document electronic, and not only that, but we can also link that document to other documents in the chain. So I mentioned before about an AP invoice. Yes, we can store the AP invoice as it comes in from your suppliers, but we can also store some of that all-important documentation that goes along with it, that proof information. So maybe it's the check that paid that invoice or a series of invoices. It could be the receiving documents, packing slips that came in along with the goods that you received. We have the ability for you to seamlessly bring those into IntelliChief, to index them, add that metadata, and then link them. So now you've got the full transaction history. Or even further back, maybe it's the purchase order. So you see the PO to the AP invoice and then the documentation that validated that you could then pay it. Also with that is we can enable through our management console specific permissions, not only for the users, but if you think about it, we're an electronic document system, right? Electronic content management. Well, we can help you extend that level of control and access, not just for your internal personnel, but maybe to an auditor that's on site doing their field work. Another thing when we talk about validate the internal controls. So if you look at IntelliChief beyond just storing those documents, we also have a very powerful workflow. And that workflow can automate your process through IntelliChief and ensure that that process is in place and is enforced. Along with that, for approval authority. So if you think about trying to validate and ensure in your electronic process that you are always following the same authority approval process for who can approve what invoices based on specific criteria. Well, IntelliChief can enforce that. And again, back to the making sure that the specific people in the process are the ones that have not only access but are utilized within the electronic process in IntelliChief. And then in the fourth bullet here, data validations. So you could equate it to garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you don't get the right data in and you're not validating that data, then there's a lack of control. But within the IntelliChief process, we can validate all of that information that's stored associated with your documents and provide messaging to the user to show that not only did we validate the data, but if there was an issue, that it wasn't able to leave that part of the workflow process. And then also, once it's in IntelliChief, you think about it, now you can demonstrate that your process is being followed. And then through IntelliChief, you're validating that you've got that level of control. So you can validate it, you can demonstrate it, and then you can even show that it's been followed by the history and the reports that you can create, as well as those visible indicators like issue codes that we've mentioned. So moving on here. So to take it the next step is, what are the specific modules that are in use when we talk about how we can help you in your audits? Well, for one, the big one is the workflow, right? So when we talk about being able to validate and then demonstrate your process and your controls, all of your business process is contained within or enabled through our workflow. So if you're an AP customer, then we have AP automation specific packages that are specific to your ERP that ensure that we've got those checks and balances built into the workflow based on including what has to be valid. Next is for those invoices that need to route for approval. We can give you a visual indicator of whether or not that invoice was approved or rejected by what user and at what time. So another visual indicator of your process, but also from an audit perspective, it's a quick at-a-glance view to be able to show that it was followed. Beyond that is in our workflow, we have a specific stage that we call our routing group stage. This ties directly in with the item below, the workflow routing group. So we can take your approval level or authority levels that you have defined for your company, and we can enforce those in IntelliChief. So if you think about it, you have a certain routing process for a given invoice. We can take that invoice routing process, enable it, enforce it in IntelliChief based on a invoice or a specific category and a dollar amount, and ensure it receives the proper authority, and then demonstrate that you have met the criteria for why that document was allowed to be paid. Beyond that, our Workbench client, which is really the window into IntelliChief. There you can view the documents, you can look at that all-important document history that shows you the full audit history of everything. You can see what invoices have been approved and rejected, and again, you can get that visual indicator of a rubber stamp if that's enabled. Next to that is we have our IntelliChief Analytics capability, which allows you or your users to put together either reports specific to what maybe an auditor might want to see, or to show that you've got the controls that beyond just working in IntelliChief, that you're monitoring the activity associated with your business process. And lastly, there are oftentimes needs where you do have to provide maybe hard copies of that material. And with IntelliChief Export Link, which is really more of a back office IntelliChief tool, it allows you the ability to export specific documents out of IntelliChief and in a PDF format that you can then make available if you don't want to just give somebody, say, read access into your IntelliChief repository. And this is, of course, in addition to the ability to, say, print the document from IntelliChief, or to also email that document out. So that was just a quick set of slides just to show you and provide some details behind the IntelliChief and how we can help you in your. What I'd like to do now is to spend some time going through a quick demonstration of some of this audit capability or the tools that we can enable for you, or that you can enable in IntelliChief to make your audit process easier. So I'm going to transition from this slide deck to a demonstration version of IntelliChief here. And please, if for some reason you have any difficulty seeing it, please pop a question in to the webinar panel. That way I can see. Okay, so right from here, I'm going to reduce the slide deck, and then we're going to switch over to IntelliChief. The way that I'm going to start this is, let's assume first that you have a user who's logged in, and their job is to approve an invoice. So when this user here goes in, they know that they have to approve an invoice because it's in their inbox. We can see here, once we open it, all of the information about this specific invoice. We know it's a non-PO invoice. It's been routed to this user because they have to approve it. And then we give that user very specific actions that they can take associated with it based on this specific stage in the workflow. So when we talk about the controls associated with your business process, right from here, these are the only actions that a user is allowed to take, right? So you can enable those permissions and those controls. So if this user then approves this invoice, this is the action that they take. And that's based on the user having a certain approval authority limit for that particular invoice. And once that invoice is approved, you'll notice that it's left that inbox to go forward in the workflow. So if we were to look at say the other invoice, where that invoice is within the process, you'll notice that that user only had that one function. So again, you can validate to your auditors that that user had a particular function, and that once that document has left their particular part in the process, it's really left, and from their inbox view, they don't really have any other interaction with that document. So once that's taken, now if I log in with a user who has an elevated level of authority, and for this I'm going to log in as an administrator, so bear with me. You can see where and what is going on with that document once it gets to the next stages. So now I'm going to log in as an administrator, and we'll just have to give it a second here to go through. And I might add too, just on the controls within IntelliChief, everything that you see going on right now in the background, not only are we loading this the client view, but we're also bringing in all of that authority level that this user has that's different from, say, the other user that I was logged in as. So now if I go back up here into the other inboxes that, say, an AP processor might see, you can see here we've got that same invoice now. But one of the things I want to point out is from an audit perspective, what we've done is we've taken the data from that approver who approved the invoice, and we've stamped it on the image. So you can see here that Brenda Davis approved it. She approved it on 2/25/2021. So that's, again, another indelible mark that we've made. The initial invoice that came in, we didn't have that stamp nor the ability to put that stamp on until it met certain criteria in the workflow. In this case, it was approved by this user based on this dollar amount, and we give the time and date. The other thing that we can do within this, and this is something you can give access to your auditors or even your own internal auditors, is if you were to right-click on this document, we have this other option here that shows routing and approval history. What this is you could almost think of it as a rider on top of the document. Will show you specifically the approval process that this document has taken based on the amount. So you see here the test value that we've been using for everybody who's had to approve this document has been the invoice amount of $800. And then if we scroll down to the very bottom, you can see the last approver or any other approver. So I use this invoice quite often in some demonstrations, so that's why you see it throughout. But here I've got the timestamp and every activity that's taken place specific to this invoice. And it was marked as approved as 2/14, which was just 3 minutes ago. So this is yet another example of the audit information that IntelliChief is retaining associated with this document, and it's indelible. So this information will travel with this document through its entire life within IntelliChief, and it can't be edited by a user, or for that matter, even an administrator of IntelliChief. And if need be, you could even print this. The third option that you have as well is the history that we talked about. So you'll notice here, in fact, I'll bring this out so you can see more of the information, is we maintain a very thorough audit log of everything that happens with the document from the moment it was brought in all the way through to the latest activity. So you can see even that we're viewing the document. The benefit here is that, again, just like that little log of the approvers, is that our auditors can see not only all of the individual user activities that have taken place, but all of the systematic activities that have taken place to ensure that you're following your business process within our system and that it's being followed. So again, this is indelible. This is going to go with this document. Even if you change document types, or you move this to, for some reason, a different document type, this same audit history will follow it. It's tied to that document. So again, another way that if you are giving your internal auditors or even external auditors access to IntelliChief, where they can look at this information in real time and see exactly what's going on, not only with current documents, but also documents that have already passed through the approval process and have been paid in your ERP. So let me just dock that. So again, just some quick ways that you can see all of the information about a document, as well as the index fields that are on it. So let's follow that path a little bit. Let's say that you now want to give an auditor access to IntelliChief. How might you go about doing that? And this is something your IT administrators of IntelliChief can certainly do on their own. So first, you have to go into the management console. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an audit user group. And the audit user group will be used to define the set of permissions and controls that anybody that's assigned to that group can perform in IntelliChief. So from here, I'm going to go to the user group section. And I'm going to create a group. So click this button here, and I won't get too creative. We'll call this audit user group. And then maybe I have an email address assigned with this one, but I'm just going to what I call stub it out. And then next, we're going to assign permissions. So you notice at IntelliChief, the level of permissions that you can grant are pretty you can fine tune them quite a bit. So really all we want to be able to do is to allow this users who are part of this group to be able to log in and perform, let's say, perform searches. They don't need any other access. They don't need to edit anything. They don't need to add index fields. We're not going to let them capture new documents in. Certainly not going to allow them any type of administrative access to the system. And that's it. So now they can log in. They can perform searches. Once we do that, we could even define then a user that we're going to add to that group. And again, let's get really creative here. We're going to call this test auditor. And we have to give them a username and a password. And then now we're going to assign that user to the group here. And then also, if you wanted to, you could define individual permissions specific to that user, or you could keep them as the group level. I recommend trying to use the group level wherever possible. Oops, I didn't add an email address. So in this case, since they don't have an email address, we're just going to say use group. So now we've added our auditor user, we've added our auditor group, but what we haven't done so far is given that auditor group any access to any specific documents. So you notice here we've got this key. One, they've got an inbox, but two, we don't have any documents defined. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go give them access to all of the AP invoices that have passed through IntelliChief. So you see here, we've got the AP invoice document type. And now look, once again, we've got tunable parameters for access. If you double click on this, what we're going to do is we're going to allow this audit user to know that this document type is stored in IntelliChief. We're going to allow them to view the document, and then we're going to allow them to view it if it's multiple pages. We're not going to give them any permissions to edit the document types or anything beyond that. But what we may do is we'll give them history access, so that way they can view this document, not only the document, but any history that's associated with it. And that's it. We don't have to give them any BPP access because they're not going to be bringing any documents in. So now we've defined a user, we've defined that user's group, and we've given them very explicit permission as far as what they can do. You'll notice everything we do is set to deny by default, and then you have to explicitly give that user access, in this case, this auditor. And that's it. So now we've got this user here that we created, this test user with the test username of tAuditor. And now we can log in and see what that looks like for that user. Just give it a second for this to come up. Okay, great. And the user has come up, so we'll just enter that user's information that we just created. So once again, when we try to log in, it's downloading all of those permissions that we've set up for this user that are different from the last. So now, when they go to search, they can only see the specific document that we've given them access to. So now if they do an open-ended search, now you can see that we've only got 2 invoices that have been processed all of the way through. They can't see any other document types, and if they go to open this document, they're going to see basically the same thing that your users would see, but with far less controls. So if we go back to this one, or another document here, you can see that they've got specific access to this document. Now, interestingly enough, they didn't have access to that other document that we approved because it hasn't finished the workflow process, right? It was still remaining. The user had approved it, but we didn't actually voucher it into the ERP yet, so it isn't a completed transaction. So if we wanted to expand access, or for that matter, if now they only want to see, or you only want to give them access to specific documents, for example, we could take, let's say the vendor number here, or the supplier number, that's 4344, and now we could even tighten up the level of security that that we give to that user. So watch this. So we're going to log back out, and we're going to log in with somebody with elevated access to IntelliChief. And the reason we're doing this is because not only can you give access to your auditors to a wide range of documents, but you could also give access to your auditors to, say, very specific documents, or maybe down to the invoice level, or maybe you want to give them access to a specific set of vendors. In fact, I worked with one customer where they had given the financial team a list of all of the transactions that they wanted to see, and in their case, they wanted to specifically export them instead of going into IntelliChief. So we were able to give them access, and through our export link, export those specific documents that they wanted to see. Those specific invoices are related to transactions. But if you wanted to do it this way, then through the permissions that I'm going to show you, you could limit document access to those specific set of invoices. Here, we're just going to do it based on supplier number. So now I'm going to go back to that audit user group, press this key, and now what we're going to do is, for this document type, we're specifically going to enable field levels. We're going to set a new condition based on supplier number. Supplier name, supplier number. There we go. And create a new condition. So we're going to say here it's index field, and we're going to say supplier number has to equal this value, and we're going to say 4344. Now you notice this lit up because we've given them conditional access to those documents. Might add too, while we're going through this, is that this demo environment is actually running on a virtual machine on my laptop. So performance that you see with this logging in and logging out for you in a live deployment. So we're going through that login process again here. Then once this loads, we'll be back to that inbox. Now, I wouldn't expect any documents to be in somebody's inbox because they're not, this user isn't part of it. This is just the way that we launch. Now, if I were to do a search, if I set my rule up right, now, before when I did that search, you saw two different invoices. But here, now we just have that one specific vendor invoice that this user is allowed to see. So you have a number of controls, not only that you can use with, say, an audit user to give them access to this material or to validate your process has been followed, but you can also do this even for your own internal auditors and have your own group, or maybe you just have some view users that need to see information. But just like before, now I can see all of the activities that specifically happened associated with this document. So you still get the benefit of all of this information in the history that an auditor could look at, proof that you're following that process. So that's a quick view into how you could give an auditor access, what they can see, what you can limit. You'll notice here on this document, I can't edit any index fields or any information because that's what we've limited it to. I also don't have the ability to print or email this document out. So you can put very strict controls into how somebody can access the information that you store in IntelliChief, but still make certain views of it available. And for that matter, you could even expand it. So now this user doesn't necessarily have access to see related documents, but you could also give them access to, say, any of the related documents, like a check, or say a purchase order that they had access that was related to that invoice. So then they could see the full transaction history of it. So above and beyond that, and I'll show you that in a second, we also have our analytics. And analytics, let me just log in here, is another way for you to represent data. So as we talked about, one of the things that we're enforcing within IntelliChief is the ability for you to follow an approval routing process based on users' authority level. Well, what if your auditors wants to see that report? One of the things that we make available in analytics is we have a report that's called workflow routing groups. And this is the routing group that controls who can approve what invoices based on, say, what dollar amount. And you'll notice when I go into this workflow here, so I've got a very small routing table, right? I only have 3 or 4 users in here. But what this can show to your auditors without giving them any type of admin access to IntelliChief, but now they can validate that invoice that I saw that went through that approval chain and saw that audit report. They can validate that based on the users here. So we logged in as this user here, Brenda. Brenda has approval of up to $2,500 for non-PO invoices. So now anything above that would have to flow to the person that this user reports to. In this case, it would have gone to Bob Smith, and Bob Smith, maybe he's the CEO, has unlimited authority. So we have a very limited type of approval authority up to 20. Anything above that has to go to the next user. So this is another way to use this type of a report in conjunction with the actual invoice data stored in IntelliChief for you to show and to validate that you are actually following your authority limits. And now you can see, once it's above this limit, who the next approver is. And for that matter, if you have different businesses, units, you might even want to use category routing. And you could enable that in IntelliChief to ensure that maybe a given plant or maybe you have remote locations that you could start to use categories to now fine-tune that approval authority to make sure that your invoices are routing to the right people. And now you can validate all of this to anybody that's auditing your process. And it's right here automatically. There's nothing you have to do other than have analytics and then have permission to this self-service report that we make available. So above and beyond that, you can certainly create your own reports. So if you wanted a report that showed all of the invoices that have been through your process, you could enable a self-service report that you could build, or that we could build for you, that shows you those invoices. So just like before, where now I had invoices that had been processed, I've got that same list, and I can show not only some of the initial header data, but I can even get the dollar amount for the invoice. I can show the invoice number, and we can organize this into a report that you could then automatically even email out to your auditors. And then other examples of reports, maybe you want to be able to show an approval report. Instead of having to wade through each specific invoice, now you want to be able to put an invoice together that shows who approved an invoice and when. Now you can show that Brenda Davis here approved this invoice, and then you can see the date of when it was approved, and you could get all of this information associated with all of your particular users. So this is another way where analytics can really aid you, right? So if you don't need to go down the route of giving people individual access to documents, you just need to provide an overall audit report of who approved an invoice and when. Now you can see all of the way through till when this report was refreshed of all of the activity that happened associated with all of your invoices. And even if they had access now, you could open individual invoices right from IntelliChief. And for that matter, if they didn't have access to that invoice in IntelliChief, it wouldn't allow it to be displayed either. And just a couple of other examples here. If you wanted to then show them all of your current invoices that are in process, you could even develop a report that shows all of the different AP invoices that are currently in process that haven't been, say, vouchered into your ERP yet. So it's about 2:36 here, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions. So in wrapping up and in summary, I hope what you've been able to get out of this is that we understand that you're storing a lot of very important documents with us. You're entrusting us with your business process and the ability to enforce it. What we wanted to be able to show is that you can also use IntelliChief to hopefully make your audit process easier and provide either direct access to your auditors with very limited controls, but still provide them with a good amount of data that shows not only that they can see those documents, but that they can ensure that you have the controls in place to manage your process, that you are managing it, and you can even demonstrate to them how you're using IntelliChief in your process, and then provide the reports and the data to back that up. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to hang on and answer them for you. Certainly, if you have questions after this, by all means, email them to me or anybody on the IntelliChief team, and we'll be happy to get them answered. So I know we have this set to 2:45, but let's hang on for a few more minutes. And then if I see questions pop up in the question section, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other questions here, so I think we're all set. Thank you for attending. I hope this was as worthwhile for you as it was for me. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.